Coquitlam is one of the most beautiful cities in British Columbia, within 35 minutes of downtown Vancouver. It truly is the perfect combination of urban accessibility combined with a stunning natural landscape for families and for those who simply love nature. Join us as we look at what drives Wesbild today and to celebrate 40 years of Westbild's legacy, a journey of the birth of Burke Mountain and Westwood Plateau. Strive.
This is a company that builds infrastructure in communities where people live. And I think that that's a pretty cool thing to do. At the end of the day, to be able to drive through neighborhoods and say, I had a part in creating this where these people are now living, recreating, working.
We get to actually move like mountains and earth to create communities, so that's pretty special.
Yeah, a lot of developers are in and out after 3-4 years, and then they move on to the next. But I mean, Coquitlam, we've been there since 1981.
Wesbild is not like other development companies. We are doing large-scale civil and infrastructure as opposed to towers and townhouses. There's not a lot of developers who can do what we do on such a steep mountainside. It takes a lot of experience, trial and error, really close relationships with our designers and builders to come together and create a plan right from the get-go before we're submitting anything to the city and work through those challenges. So it's definitely a company that I couldn't compare to anybody else.
When we look at a problem, look at a design, and we're contemplating how we're going to go about something, we start with what's the right answer. We don't start with what's the cheapest answer. But to work for a company that accepts that and then pays for it is pretty phenomenal.
When we look at a piece of land and envision what it is that we want to see happen on that land, we look at it from a holistic perspective and a very practical perspective. Through that vision, we are able to create really significantly wonderful places that people enjoy living in.
From Hyde Creek to our large-scale environmental projects, it's important that Wesbild is protecting the environment alongside developing the community.
A lot of our developments are right up against the provincial park, so that interface is extremely important for the wildlife, flora and fauna to kind of integrate into our projects, into our developments. We are kind of giving back to nature in that sense because we have to build homes, but we do it in a very environmentally friendly way.
We have done a lot that people don't always see. You know, whether it's the underground 1 million liter storage tank for water, which helps the environment, and what that does for fish and the streams and the water runoff from the mountain. Pretty amazing project. And it's like, oh yeah, we built that and we covered it up and no one knows about it. In the end of the day, I think if you look at the landscaping, the sidewalks, the community itself, that's what I think differentiates Wesbild.
You can stand up tall and proud when you're working for Wesbild because they're going to do right by the community and they're going to do right by the environment.
Wesbild knew that park space and trails were obviously very important for a community as well. Neighborhoods were designed to incorporate natural green spaces, taking advantage of the hydro right-of-ways and using those for park space. Creating trails, not only forest trails, but trails between neighborhoods. It's a very important part of every community.
That connects the community really to all different aspects of what exists out there, as it all becomes this interconnected web of community and of fun.
Can't tell you how many school sites we played a major role in to bring services or the land where they wanted the schools. We had to make adjustments. We gave up land in order to make the schools work. You know, why do we ever sponsor a school bus? Well, we sponsor a school bus because we were building out a community, and then the school district didn't have the funding to provide buses.
We engage with the community instead of waiting for people to come to us. That's been a lot easier to build those relationships.
In 2004, one of our owners, Mrs. Asha Shahi, was looking to expand her charitable efforts, her community giving, and we got introduced to a lovely lady, Joanne Granick, who was the executive director of SHARE at that point, who boldly told Mrs. K the one thing she needed for our community was a new building. And Mrs. K said yes. We bought and purpose renovated the Clark Street building in Port Moody that has been the home for the food bank, a family resource center, and many other services such as counseling since they opened in 2005 at no net cost to them.
What I think is so important about our relationship with SHARE is that they actually work to strengthen people and help the community on a different level. Together, Wesbild and SHARE actually take really good care of the community.
It is natural to do things for the community. It's not something I sit down at home and plan for it. It comes naturally.
Wesbild has become, I think, a very respected player. Virtually all aspects of development, Wesbild has taken its place in the top echelon, I think, of how people perceive developments.
Westwood Plateau.
Westwood Plateau was an amazing start for Wesbild.
The market wasn't great. I did not have a great deal of experience on land development.
Hassan was involved in making sure that we had confidence that we knew what we were doing.
I essentially bet the farm on it.
Westwood Plateau was an easy opportunity to lose all your money real fast.
Wesbild was this little company that had done a couple of towers, was starting Future Shop off. No one really knew of the company.
The province put the land on the market. We were not in the land development business. Out of sheer ignorance, perhaps, we decided to make a bid.
It was an opportunity that the company looked at, and they made a very aggressive run at it. They really wanted to get this project. They were competing against the biggest names in the development industry in the city at the time.
The spreadsheets we used showed a price between 35 million and 85 million. And I went this way and that way and the other way, and I came to the conclusion that a bid at the mid-60s would work. And that's what I made the bid on.
The big tipping point for Wesbild being successful in that bid was the fact that it was an all-cash offer. They got this piece of property, 1,410 acres of land in the Lower Mainland, all contiguous, ready to go, and the group hit the ground running.
In the early days of the project, as we were struggling to acquire the zoning and wondering what the market was going to be doing and spending all that money on infrastructure, I always sensed that he did trust us, even in those days when we were the ones who were trying to carry out his bet.
The key person that was hired was Ted Erst. He came from a planning background, but had spent a lot of time in development of large tracts of land. Tony Zappone as their sales and marketing fellow. The dynamic of that group, they were a little bit crazy.
I went in and met Ted, where he had this graphic on a tripod, and he was showing me what the hell was going on. I look and I go, wow, this thing's huge. It's massive. I thought, wow, this is once in a lifetime. This is huge.
If you had an idea, you had to be prepared to defend it.
Sometimes we'd get into yelling matches, because we cared so much about what we were doing, But at the end of the day, we all walked away as friends, and we came to solutions and got things done.
And that dynamic of being able to put everything on the table and not be afraid to say something and have it all come back, that was the miracle part about that team being able to create such a fantastic project at Westwood Plateau, because they cared so much.
In our weekly project meetings, everybody pitched in on everything. When you needed a decision on something important, Hassan would be in the room. He would go around the room and ask everybody what their opinion was, and then give his determination of what we were going to do. Everybody had been listened to, but there was no delay in arriving at decisions. And that was hugely important, I think, in terms of making a successful project.
I was involved in detail in what happened in Westwood Plateau because it was a big project, and the success and failure of it was very important to us.
You know, there was no pipes, there was nothing, there was no services, there was no sewers, there was no sanitary, there was no water, there was no electricity, there was no roads, there was absolutely nothing. There's a sign of a boat. Westwood Plateau was an easy opportunity to lose all your money real fast. It did not go that well at first. I mean, we went 3-4 years. I mean, Hassan got in well over $100 million before he even sold one lot.
First task was to get the builders to understand what we had. You know, they really didn't know, you know, what we were trying to do up there. And the fact that, hey, it really is going to happen, you know, because a lot of people didn't think it was going to happen.
The word going around the development community was, you know, that Wesbild had maybe paid too much for the land. The vultures were starting to circle as to, you know, when they'd be able to pick up some scraps.
When we first started, we had sold one piece of land to a guy called Albert, who operated from the back of his truck.
I'd made all these phone calls and talked to all these people and meetings and, you know, finally broke through with the first sale. And I remember telling him, you know, he's the first sale. You're the first guy, you know, of this massive project. You're the first guy to buy, you know, a lot. We were kind of excited about that because I thought, hey, here's the start of sales. You know, we're gonna get it going. And came back to the office to, you know, put the report in, and Hassan was in the meeting, and he goes, Mr. Zapone? I said, well, we have one sale. He says, we have Albert. You know, and I said, yeah, we got one sale. And he said, that's all you have is just one sale? You know, it was something like he said, I've spent all these multi-millions of dollars and you have one sale, you know? And, you know, it made you kind of feel bad, but on the other hand, it was a start, you know?
And that was the only thing we had sold. And we owed the bank $73 million. And one of my employees thought the best thing we can do is to sell topsoil from the property. So I had a lot of sleepless nights.
So there was two challenges. One was just a soft market, and two was telling the market, hey, come to Westwood Plateau. And so those were the two kind of messaging things that the team had to work with.
We had to find a way to draw them up there. This is a forest, there was nothing up there. You know, how do we get them to understand what we're building here? You know, so that was one of the big components of it. Wesbild didn't build houses. So we were trying to get the builders to understand that we would support them. And I said to them, I said, look, what we're trying to do is get people to bug their builder. And I didn't even think that that would be the theme. We're just trying to get these people to phone and bug the builder, bug them to try and, you know, get them to say, hey, have you heard about the Westwood Plateau? Can you build me a house? Like, you know, tell me about it.
They had these full-page ads that were just brilliant. It was drive your builder around the bend.
Immediately, we looked and go, this is good stuff. And it worked. It bloody well worked.
The market started to pick up gradually. And when we did the Street of Dreams, it was very successful for the first time in Coquitlam. Houses were built and sold over $2 million. It was unheard of, but it happened.
First Street of Dreams was certainly a turning point.
So in 1992, Westbild hosted the first Street of Dreams outside of the US. You would build a number of homes in an area, they would gate it off, and then they would charge people to come and walk through these show homes.
We ended up going to Hassan and you know, explaining it to him, and I think, you know, it took a while, but he gave us the nod because it was a, you know, fairly high expense.
People were paying money to come and look at homes for sale.
Because it was a show and people were talking about, oh, have you been to the Street of Dreams? Oh, it's at the Westwood Plateau. We got to go to the Street of Dreams. It's at the Westwood Plateau. You can't buy enough advertising to get people to say that. And so that was one of the big hits for the place. And when you blew the dust away after the show closed, we had 120,000 people. The most successful show that any Street of Dreams had ever produced. We started getting sales, home sales. The builders were starting to get contracts to build homes.
First Street of Dreams was certainly a turning point. And I think by then, a lot of people in the industry had realized that what Wesbild was doing up there was bold, but it wasn't foolhardy. And the project was being successful.
When it proved successful, I thought it was great. I kept my opinion to myself beforehand.
The development agreement did not contemplate a golf course. And the thinking of the golf course was that, again, we needed something to bring people to Westwood Plateau.
They persuaded me to build a golf course and a clubhouse. It cost about $30 million in total.
They liked the idea of being able to introduce a golf course to help boost the profile of the project.
At the time, we're talking about the late 80s, early 90s. There was a big boom in golf. Westwood Plateau had a significant amount of land that was developable if it wasn't for the fact that there was huge megawatt power lines. We've got all this land. It was part of the 1,400 acres that we bought. What can we do with it?
You don't really build a golf course to run a golf operation. You build a golf course so you can hang your lots and your homes around the golf course and then sell the golf course mystique, if you will.
People just like looking at it because it's beautiful, it's manicured, it's wonderful, and there's nobody there. It's nice,
Many of the builders, even if they were like a mile away from the golf course, still had a mention of the Westwood Plateau golf course in their ad.
It did end up using 50 or 60 acres of what would otherwise have been residential land, but our analysis showed that it added value to all other 4,000 units. And the golf course did ultimately prove to be a really big marketing benefit.
On Westwood Plateau, people often perceive it as a neighborhood of expensive homes. And that perception was created on purpose. We have a loop road that goes around Plateau Boulevard and Parkway Boulevard. What it did was created what was referred to at that time as a string of pearls. So that when someone drives around the plateau, and they do it on this loop road, you have the perception, because of these big homes that you're seeing along this road, that this is a pretty fancy place. But if you look a little bit deeper, some of those mansions aren't mansions, they're actually duplexes. And they're not duplexes that look like a mirrored duplex side by side. These were designed so it was two homes in a building that read like a single home. There was all sorts of housing types. There was small lot, there was bare land strata, townhouses. Apartments were built on Westwood Plateau, which was very unusual at the time. One of the very last projects, it is actually this incredible, gorgeous concrete tower that's up there. So Plateau was really developed to appeal to a wide range of homeowners and families, move up, move down markets. One of the unusual aspects of doing a project like this is you have to come up with street names.
The idea of doing street naming was always something that had kind of appealed to me, figuring out how the street names help to create a sense of neighborhood.
Most people build a tower or a building on an established street, but here there was well over 100 streets that had to be named. What they did was they decided to come up with thematic groupings for the names. If there was something there that you could actually tie the name into that had some history and made some more sense, that's really what you wanted to do. When Wesbild bought Westwood Plateau, the Westwood racetrack was still in operation, been there since I believe the late 50s. So what Paul Young did at the time, and this is like city planners going crazy and having fun. This is as fun as it gets for us planners. He took that racetrack and he said, well, let's use that and see if we can build our roads and our neighborhood around that. Many of the names in that area, the street names, were after the racetrack. Haddock Drive, which is where the pits were. Moss Court, named after Sterling Moss. Firestone Place for all of the tires. We found tens of thousands of tires up there. So the racetrack had this straight stretch, and that's where the racers got up to their top speed. But the straight stretch also had a bump in it, and so if you got too much speed, cars could actually get airborne and they went off the track and crashed into the forest. And this bump was known as Deer's Leap.
I had to come up with a subdivision plan that put an intersection right at that point, because otherwise, cars might be going too fast and would actually be still doing the same thing as they did when it was part of the racetrack.
Wesbild made sure that the school sites were created immediately, were serviced immediately, so that the school district could come in and build them as quickly as possible.
We didn't want to be building a neighborhood where people had to send their kids somewhere else to go to school.
Can't tell you how many school sites we played a major role in to bring services or the land where they wanted the schools. We had to make adjustments. We gave up land in order to make the schools work.
We had built 2 golf courses, 2 clubhouses, playgrounds, tennis courts. We built a little strip mall. We built a shopping center. I mean, there was nothing hardscape left on planet Earth that we could build. We don't need to build any more hardscape. We need to build a community. That's really what made Westwood Plateau a fantastic place to be.
Hay rides at the golf course, Christmas light competitions, and you name it, you could do it at that point. That feeling of belonging, I think it helped add value to the real estate, and it gave people a reason to really want to be there.
It was very important to not only sell property and sell homes, but it was just as important to build community so that everyone there said, yeah, I live on Westwood Plateau. And that meant something.
It simply could not have been accomplished at all without the wonderful cooperation from the city of Coquitlam and particularly the engineering department and our planning department.
It was not only us collectively as a Wesbild group, but it was the consultants that we had hired who were just top notch.
Engineers, planners, surveyors,
yeah,
geotech.
It was just a whole combination of a lot of really good people that came together to work on this thing and make it a success.
But what's amazing is that core team of 4 or 5 people, they stuck together for the entire project, which was 15, 20 years. And most of that group stayed with Wesbild for even longer, 30 and 40 years. So to have that longevity in a company is, today especially, is unusual.
We knew what we had in front of us, and we cared so much about making sure we did the right thing, to make sure that this project was going to go off, the way it deserved to go off.
Westwood Plateau is an amazing development. It's unusual for one company to own so much land and be able to develop it in a cohesive manner and to create this very cohesive community. So as we look across the Lower Mainland, I think that Westwood Plateau really stands out as something different and important the way it came about. And now when I drive around that community, 40 years, 35 years, 30 years after the homes have been built, it still wears really well. The homes, for the most part, look good. There's a lot of stucco, but knowing that Wesbild built that and did it at a time when it was unusual, it's pretty cool.
25,000 people living at Westwood Plateau, called Westwood Plateau home. When we started, there was nobody. If they choose and elect to live in a community we've had a hand in, well, that's wonderful. Yeah.
Burke Mountain.
Westwood Plateau was wrapping up, and Wesbild was looking for their next opportunity. And there was talk within the city about Burke Mountain, northeast Coquitlam as it was known, to be the next place where development should take place.
I have to say it was quite daunting because Burke was such a big project.
The scale is something hard to describe. It's hard to put into words. You really need to see it from a plane, see it from an aerial shot
It wasn't so much starting over, it was just moving one from one mountainside to the other. I mean, you could see the other one.
For anyone driving through or walking through both neighborhoods, they may not really perceive that much of a difference. The differences really came about in how we could build the neighborhoods. On Burke Mountain, yeah, we owned a lot of land, and some of it was contiguous, but there was little pieces here and little pieces here. So we didn't have that ability to do that contiguous and thought out development.
At the very beginning, it was a lot of meeting with the community and figuring out what Burke was going to be. We spent a lot of evenings and weekends explaining our vision, what the community plan looked like. The community that already lived here was a big part of it. So when we looked to bring the marketing in, we really wanted to keep with the feel of what Burke was and keep Burke Mountain in the name. And that's why we landed on the foothills of Burke Mountain, because that is where we are on the base of Burke Mountain.
The suggestion was given to me, like, it'd be great if you had some kind of, you know, directional signage or, you know, something that would help people find the different projects that you had with your builders. And I thought it was a great idea.
We had an entire signage system up here dedicated to our builders, and what we used to call, internally called the Map of the Stars, was a map you could come get at the Discovery Center that would lead you around the mountain to look at the trails and the parks and where the future school sites and park sites were going to be, and also to get you out to our builders and drive traffic to their show homes.
That's one of the advantages of buying land from Westbild. You don't just buy a piece of property and then we walk away. Westbild stays involved with the marketing and with the community building from long before you as a buyer get on site to long after you're finished. And that was a case here where Westbild would take on and do joint marketing for all of the individual builders, while they could then market their product to be better than the other product.
We took on the big picture. I mean, there were so many builders and they were in so many different places. We really put together the vision of what the community was going to be, and that's what our marketing focused on.
Because of our history on the plateau, Westbild was a known entity. So when we started with Burke and we had that big bunch of land, the city knew who they were dealing with.
Our relationship with Coquitlam is nothing like I've seen. We always take it for granted because we do a lot of work with them. We talk to them constantly.
We're in the same municipality, you know, we got the same guys we talk to for zoning and planning and engineering and so on. It's the same good folks. There's a mutual respect. You know, we've been here since the 80s. You know, if we say we're going to do something, it's going to get done.
You know how Westbild tries to build community, you know, especially at the beginning when no one knew where Burke Mountain was. And what was it like working with Westbild at the city?
We've created here, you know, again, in collaboration with the local government and the community, is something you can be proud of. Obviously, Westbild has been a long-time major player in Coquitlam, well-respected in that. Done a lot for the community, a lot of contributions sort of above and beyond a good corporate citizen.
Yeah.
Westbild has taken some real, special care and attention to how they design these neighborhoods. So where Westbild's energies and abilities can sort of mesh with the city's, vision and ambitions, you can result in some really nice stuff like the Pioneer Park down the end of the street here.
Jim, it's really good to see you again and get you back out on site in the neighborhood. Thanks for making time for us.
Oh, you're most welcome, Ray. We've known each other for many, many, many years. We've worked together, and it's just great to see. It's by and large, it's a well-established community up here.
I think when you go to Burke now and you see the community that's been built, and we're not done yet, right? So you see where it is today versus where it was. We've built 2 community shopping centers there, to get a bank, and there's a daycare. I think that's part of building community, right? You gotta have all the elements.
I think by developing on Burke Mountain, we are revitalizing the area, right? Which is very important. And by doing that, we actually added a lot to Burke Mountain. And we built kilometers of trails, we built acres of park space, active or passive. We're also quite instrumental in bringing schools to the area, which is desperately needed.
So here on Burke Mountain, the deal was that Westbild bought all of the land from the province, and in there were certain places that schools needed to be located. Our obligation was to design the school site, subdivide it, service it, and hand it over for free to the school district.
We ended up with a 6-acre school site that we are donating to the city of Coquitlam and the school district. It's in an area where more schools are needed.
We already agreed as part of our acquisition of Burke 2 to provide school sites, and that moved land into the school district at a much lower cost.
You know, the schools are sort of finally coming, so it's really turning into that complete community.
So we've always advocated, and wherever possible, we've built things first rather than promising it's going to come.
A lot of people see Burke Mountain as just a great destination for families, which is what we wanted.
It's just, it feels good at the end of the day to go home and know that, you know, we're helping build this community.
Depending how you want to look at it, but there's another, 10 plus years of development left on Burke Mountain.
We have hundreds of acres up on Burke Mountain still to develop.
Again, development's not an easy game. There will be challenges moving forward. We need 2 neighborhood plans. We've got to build another water reservoir. It's tough work. It's tough work.
We just have to be obsessed with the end users of our products. Because most people, when they move to Burke Mountain, it's probably the biggest purchase of their life.
There's faith in Wesbild to achieve that, and I think that is so important and so key to what we do, that it gives us the confidence that we're doing the right thing.
One thing we might not realize is once Burke Mountain is done, there might not be another project like this in the lower mainland. I mean, we're constantly looking for land to recreate a project like this, but the reality is there's just not a lot of land available now to create the kind of community that we do. Relatively low density, close to nature, full of amenities. Once Burke Mountain is done, it might not happen again.
Wesbild's future.
Ever since I started at Wesbild, I've always felt like this has been an exciting time because it's been slowly evolving into something new. We're expanding our ability to do more, to actually build the vertical element as opposed to just sort of the land use planning and servicing side.
Development has never been easy. Development is not going to get any easier moving forward, and that will continue to be a challenge for us. But the land we have is amazing. And the team we have right now is really, really strong.
One thing about Wesbild, which I've always been amazed at, is the tenure of our employees. The institutional knowledge over this kind of span is incredible, especially with long-term projects and projects that are this big.
The company has attracted good talent, kept people for long periods of time. People are loyal to the company, and the company is loyal to its employees. That builds up a lot of capability among the staff.
Westwood Plateau and Burke Mountain have done well. Burke Mountain today is the community of choice in that area. I am very happy that it has worked out that way.
You have to understand, this is all of a sudden. This guy went out and came up with $63 million to buy the side of a mountain in the middle of, in those days, nowhere. Obviously became somewhere in a big way, but the sheer vision to do that sort of thing, that's all of a sudden. It's just plain all of a sudden, with all the amenities there, and the community that the Wesbild team put together and built and encouraged. That may be the most successful project in the history of Canada. It might be. I think it probably is.
I like your thinking. What's the legacy of Wesbild? What will I look back on for my years here? It's a company that builds things, and that's a great legacy to be able to see, and you can actually touch it. And I think that's something that makes me happy. As a city planner, being able to touch something and say we did that.